This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own moves. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome back to North Pod, here after what can only be described as a belting. I think anyone who was watching that game probably came away in some amount of distress. It was not good viewing. One of the notes that I made was the highlight of the match was listening to Razor Ray congratulating and encouraging the other umpires during the coverage. Just thought it came through quite clearly in the footage. You could see him clapping and cheering on umpiring decisions that happened a couple of times, which is just, if that's the highlight, you know I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. Obviously, I do joke. We will talk about some other highlights later on, but yeah, it was some tough watching, particularly after the whole game, unfortunately. I just don't know what it is with the Gold Coast. I think I saw a stat that as a team, we are the team that they have beaten the most since they came into the competition. And it certainly feels that way. I can think of a couple of times that Gary Ablett Jr. just got a hold of us and single-handedly beat us. It feels like it's been a while since we've played well against them. So, yeah, I don't know. It's tough. Wasn't good. Must be some kind of punishment for us not going to the Gold Coast all those years ago when the AFL was trying to get us to go. I don't know, some kind of karma, but I'm not enjoying it. If you missed the game or you're unsure, the final score was Gold Coast 97, North Melbourne 54, so a nice 43-point belting. We did kick 7 goals 12, so a little inaccurate, but I would also say that the Suns were quite accurate too, so a really, really comfortable defeat, unfortunately. I thought the story of the game was that the match just had real vibes of 2021, 2022. There was some real basic turnovers that led to really easy Gold Coast goals. The skill errors were just horrific, some of them. I don't know where they came from, or I feel like our errors have gotten worse over the last 6 weeks. We were relatively error-free in week 1, and you sort of progressed, and I'm sure that's not the case. I'm sure we did have errors, but we weren't getting punished for our errors maybe earlier on in the year, and yeah, those skill errors have really cost us. It just looks to me like the players can't execute the game plan at the moment. It is what it is, I guess. We've got to give the players time, but it's tough. It's really tough to give them time when it looks as bad as it did on the weekend. We were beaten repeatedly at the contest. It was hard to watch. So that's the story of the game. I think if you missed it, I wouldn't go back and watch it on the replay. It's at most you can watch the highlights. It'll mostly be Gold Coast plays. There wasn't much for us to get out of it in terms of great football to watch. Before I jump right into the positives and negatives, I just want to do my quick shout out. I've really appreciated the support that I've got over the past couple of weeks launching the podcast. I've really appreciated everyone's kind words and everyone giving it a go and listening. So I really appreciate that. Please keep sharing me with all the North Melbourne fans that you know. Please subscribe on the podcast service that you listen to. And if you're on Apple or Spotify, give me a review. Helps me get the show out there. And lastly, get involved on my social accounts. Twitter is where I've been the most active, at NorthPod Show. There's also a Facebook and Instagram and a YouTube, if that's your jam. I have taken a few Twitter suggestions that we'll get to later in the show. So if you do want to get mentioned or to bring something up, let me know in the future, and I might talk about your talking point. Let's get out of the way. Let's have our vegetables and get the negatives out of the way, and we can move on to our meat, the good part, later on. Okay, the ball movement was horrific. And the comparison between the Gold Coast and us was really jarring. They just took it up the ground, marched up the ground, slow play, uncontested mark after uncontested mark. And sure, it They didn't generally go quickly, but it was methodical. They hit targets and they generally were able to move the ball at least into their forward 50. Juxtapose that with us, we couldn't hit any of those kind of kicks that you'd hit 80% of the time. They just kept going awry. Our leading patterns didn't look right. Our ball movement was horrific. And there was a period there in the first quarter where we couldn't get it past the wing. And it was kind of at that point where I went, I think this is going to be our game. And it didn't get a lot better. We had a couple of patches where our ball movement looked okay, but by and large, it was bad. I mean, Gold Coast took twice as many uncontested marks as we did. Our skills were just really in the spotlight. I really thought watching rounds 1 and 2 that our skills had improved, and at least sort of our capacity to deliver those skills in our game plan had improved. But based on what we saw on Sunday, it didn't look that way. It was crazy. We just could not deliver on that game plan, and it didn't really matter what we did. When we tried to go the slow play, it didn't work. We generally get a ball spoiled out of bounds, and we have to start again. And I can only think of one time where we really took the game on and went through the middle and it came off. And that was when Curtis Taylor bombed it long. It ended up Paul Curtis was able to do a little fend off and kick it over the top to to Nick Larkey actually, who got a free kick and kicked a goal from that resulting possession. That was the only time that I can think of where we really took the game on through the middle and it paid off. So yeah, the ball movement juxtaposition was not good. The second negative, I guess, links to that. I'm just not really sure what the plan is when we're entering inside 50. And traditionally, I've been a bit frustrated when commentators say, well, I just don't know what North Melbourne's, like any team really, what this team's plan is. Like, I think, it's not, if the game plan's not obvious to us, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that would mean that our opposition maybe is unsure of the game plan. But to me, our plan inside 50 at the moment just seems to be bomb it in there and let's see. And the let's see ain't good. By the end of the game, we actually had pretty much level inside 50s. I think Gold Coast had one more than us by the end. But, I mean, their effectiveness going inside 50 was far superior. And that's because they were either getting a one-on-one marking contest or they were hitting up someone on a lead. There was only a couple of times where they took like a big pack mark. Generally, they were hitting up players on a lead or they had found some space. I can't think of more than one time where we hit a player on the lead in our forward line. I'm not sure what the go is. We were bombing to packs, often without our smaller players being able to hit the front and centre of those packs. Larkey was outmarked too often. But I'm going to come to his defence a little bit. I don't think he had a good game, don't get me wrong. But I do think there was several times where he was targeted, and he shouldn't have been because he had 3 on him, and or the kicks weren't to his advantage at all. Like, it'd be great if we just there was several times where if we just lower the eyes, we could have hit a 20-metre pass and gotten a mark sort of 40 metres out. But instead, we were bombing it to 25 metres out where Larkey has 3 on him, and generally not kicking it to his advantage. So, yeah, I mean, Larkey didn't have a good game, but I don't think the service that he is getting was helping him at all. And it actually reminded me a lot of 2020 with what happened with Ben Brown. I thought there's a lot of commentary around Nick Larkey being soft and not being strong enough in the contest, not putting in as much effort as he should. And I think there is an element of that, don't get me wrong, but I think back to what happened with Ben Brown, and he was the scapegoat, and I actually don't think he was the problem. So I'm nervous to put it all on Nick Larkey. I do think that the ball coming inside 50 was horrific, and it's no wonder that even though we leveled up the inside 50s, we had way less scoring opportunities. Because it was not good. Next negative, because I could go forever from this game. The Gold Coast tools killed us, and it really, much like the last couple of games, those tall forwards at the moment are posing a big problem. Max King kicked 5, Mabior Chol kicked 2. I know that Jared Witts kicked 1 when he went down there. So the tools were just dominating us in the air or everywhere, really, to be honest. Core was completely outplayed. He looked disinterested, to be honest. I'm not sure what the go was there. It's very rare that I am saying the player looked disinterested, but Core did look disinterested. He needs a spell on the twos. He wasn't good. Mackay still looked really off. He made some really poor choices, made some silly errors. Just confusing to watch, really. I'm prepared to give him a couple more weeks. I know there's plenty of commentary that says, yep, let him go as a free agent. Look, let's come on now. He was our best defender last year. Let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. He has not been good the last couple of weeks, but I do think part of that is him trying to adapt to Clarko's new game plan. So let's take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, the tools are an issue at the moment. King kicking 5, obviously. Curnow and Mackay kicked plenty on us for Carlton. I mean, the Brisbane game, Danaher and Hipwood kicked plenty on us. The defence is a massive work in progress at the moment, and I know there's growing pains with new things, but it looks really bad at the moment. They didn't get out the back as many times as the Brisbane game, but even so, the way they were able to get the way that Gold Coast was able to get sort of one-on-one contests in their forward line, or at least even numbered contests in their forward line, was a concern. And just so many free players around the ground. Our zone's still really struggling to match. And you can see it too. Like, you can see our players are hesitating in the zone and making late choices, which is why a team that is walking it through us at the moment, because our players are hesitating and they don't quite know where to be well enough yet. So yeah, anyway, the tools dominated. I mentioned it earlier, so I won't labour the point, but the next negative is that those skill errors really killed us. Simple turnovers. I could list probably half the team that made really bad choices. Tom Power was guilty for a couple, unfortunately. Luke McDonald made a really poor choice. Ben Mackay, as I mentioned before, some horrific decisions in last night's or the night before's game. Kane Turner, who I've done my best to defend, would have run on an open goal but wasn't clean, didn't pick it up, could have kicked it off the ground, didn't do that, ended up, I think, with a point. That was his moment, to create something offensively. So just way too many simple errors killing us, unfortunately. And I tweeted at one point, we're not going to win the game with turnovers like this. And yeah, it was horrific. Some of those turnovers, absolutely horrific. The last negative that I'm going to talk about it, because I could certainly talk about more, just Sheasel was shut out of the game. He got moved around after half time, sort of played a bit forward, played a little bit more in the midfield, but wasn't really able to have a significant impact. And that's the first time. So his first 5 games, obviously he had a tremendous impact. Game 6, wasn't able to replicate that. Great learning opportunity for him. Apparently he was pretty sore, got a corky, so during the week he was pretty sore. Did a great job to come up for the game. When he did get near it, he was pretty clean. He didn't do. I thought he made less mistakes than the previous week, but he just had much less of the ball. Just generally, he was shut out of the game. So Nick Holman did a great job on him, sort of a defensive forward job, like we'd love to see a Kane Turner do once in a while. Shut him out, and I'm sure it was great learning for Sheasel. So, yep, a negative. But I think we can take some positives from that. Hopefully he can get better and learn something from that experience, because he's going to cop plenty of that in the future. So you would hope this week the coaches are talking to him about how he can beat that kind of pressure in the future. On to the positives, and I tried my best to find some positives. I've only got 3. So let's whip through them. Cunnington had somewhat of a bounce back game. I guess I should have mentioned some of these positives are going to have some negatives in them too. He wasn't tremendous, don't get me wrong. It wasn't a vintage Cunners game. There were a couple of times where he got caught holding the ball trying to do too much, or he got caught holding the ball because maybe someone handballed it to him in a horrific position. But I thought that in terms of contested ball, he was our best. He and Goldy were often combining. It's just great to see Goldy, even his 300th, hitting those tap outs straight down Cunner's throat. There was good there. Cunners ended up with 27 disposals, 16 contested possessions, had 8 clearances. The one thing that he didn't have, which surprised me, he had 0 tackles, and I think that is something that the rest of the team has been lacking in recent weeks. And I know that running is not a strength of Cunners. He's not, out in space. He's not good. But I would have thought that in close he could have been putting on a couple of tackles. And I'm sure he had some attempted tackles in close. Sometimes the way that the tackle stat is recorded is a little ambiguous, but to have 0 is a concern. So that's the area that we'd like to see from him, I guess. I've said before, I think it's kind of between him and Hugh Greenwood in terms of only one of them can play, and Greeny generally is going to be tackling. He's a tackle machine, so I'd love to see a few from Cunners, but he did have a pretty solid game. Positive to Paul Curtis, mostly bounced back. He kicked 0-3, so he didn't get a goal. He had a nearly game, set up one like I mentioned earlier, had some fantastic fend-offs. He's, for a player of his size, he's really strong, plays aggressive. I love his aggression with and without the ball. So it was great to have him back. I said last week I was quite happy for him to get a couple of weeks in the VFL to build his consistency. He came straight back in, and he looked good. He looked better for the week off, so to speak. And Steve-O was good again. He kicked 2 goals too. He hit the post twice late, so he could have had 3 or 4, and they were just opportunistic goals again, like he's been getting the last couple of weeks. He's not racking up huge disposals, but every time he gets it, he's kicking a goal or having a scoring involvement. So he and Curtis were fantastic again. I'm really liking their combination up there. It's great to see elements of that forward line working. And my final positive was just, I mentioned the other week that we played horrifically, and it was a lot of our senior players that didn't play well. I thought that some of them bounced back this game. I mean, Goldstein was pretty good for his 300th match. He had 14 disposals and 33 hit-outs. I thought he won the hit-outs, or won the ruck battle. He had several hit-outs to advantage that went straight down Cunner's throat, and yeah, he was really good. I thought Zeeble, Logue, and McDonald were all solid. Zeeble in particular put his body on the line several times. He was fantastic with his intercepting, and a couple of big spoils, particularly late. Even when the game's done, Zeeble's putting his body on the line, which is why he was captain for so many years. And as I said, Logan and McDonald were okay. They were both intercepting well without being tremendous. As I mentioned, McDonald did make a couple of mistakes, but yeah, I mean, again, in a game where we got beaten thoroughly by 42 or 43 points, and it could have very easily been 60 or 70 points if Gold Coast had kicked with a bit more accuracy. I thought Logan, McDonald and Zeeble were solid. So it was good to see some of those more senior players at least putting up a bit of a fight, because, yeah, I mean, it was really hard to find. There was so many players that I just didn't know what positives I could actually say about them, to be honest. It was a tough podcast to make some notes about. Anyway, we will move on. I didn't have too many goods to talk about this game. It was tough. I did watch the VFL game before the seniors, and I mean, yeah, it was a great little entree. We got belted in that one too. Lost 136 to 80. So again, wouldn't go back and watch that one if you were thinking about it. And there weren't too many bright sparks, as you could expect from a 56-point loss. I will note, though, I thought Wardlaw was pretty good. He had 23 disposals, had 8 tackles. So he's someone that I could see potentially coming in. Greenwood went back and had his first full game for a little while. He had 27 disposals, 10 tackles, 15 clearances. So if we were looking to give a midfielder a spell like Cunnington, then perhaps potentially Greenwood could come back in. I mean, we knew he was going to go and do that. It's just he's not the future. So he had a great game, but I'm not necessarily crying out for him to come back in, because I don't think he's the sort of player that we need. Cal Coleman-Jones was good. He had 13 disposals, 24 hit-outs, 2 goals. I thought he was good. He and Hamish Free were the best ruckman for sure, and CCJ was pretty good around the ground. So if we wanted to go tall, I mean, I'm keen to get him in at some point, even just to get a proper look at him in this new structure. I don't think he got great opportunity last year. So yeah, I'd love to see him get in again at some point. I'm not sure if this coming week is the week for it. In terms of those small forwards that we've kind of had a bit of an eye on, I mean, Marnie was the best of them, but I tell you what, Spicer was nowhere near it. Eddie Ford was nowhere near it. Marnie kicked one, I think, and did some solid tackles, which I guess is what we're looking for from our small forwards. But he certainly wasn't breaking down the door. And unfortunately, Goda was injured late, did his hammy, so it looks like he'll miss a couple of weeks, which is unfortunate because he's the sort of player that we were looking to get back in. Yeah, I mean, Bergman was quiet, Archer was quiet. Like those three that I mentioned, Wardlaw, Greenwood, Cal Coleman, Jones were really the only ones that I thought were deserving of a call up, based on what I saw at least from the VFL. All right, as I mentioned before, I put out the bat signal on Twitter and just asked, what do you want discussed? And I also just put out the challenge, what positives can North Melbourne Twitter come out with from the game? So I'm just going to go through a couple of those now. Sorry if I mispronounce your name or say it wrong. I'm doing my best, so feel free to correct me in the future if you need to. Thinker said, we didn't get any injuries. Charlie Common's played 6 in a row and will be the number one forward before the end of the year or the week. Yep, I would agree with all of that, Thinker. I'm not sure that he's going to be the number one forward by the end of the week, but he's looking like a really good, strong, contested player, and it's great that he's getting a good run at it. I think that was his 8th game because he played 1 game last year and 1 game the year before that. So great to get him with some consistency. I would agree with that. And I didn't mention him in the positives, but he was positive. It was another one of those games where he had a bit of a nearly game, took a couple of good marks, missed a couple of set shots. I do think he needs to work on his set shots, but he's promising. I thought he was pretty good. Zerha's wine glass tattoo, interesting Twitter name. Charlie Common's a massive positive. The lad is crashing packs and looking seriously dangerous. Going to be a good player. Love his tackling, pressure, and so on. Yeah, I agree. Charlie, we've covered that. And Beanie underneath him says the combination of Common and Paul Curtis and Stevo roving off him in forward 50 will be good to see. And I definitely agree with that. I think those 3 players have been really solid, generally speaking. And they were solid this week for sure. And I know people are off Larky at the moment. I do think he'll get there. I believe in Suv Larky. I think we just need to kick it to him with a bit more precision. And again, like make any danger of hitting him on the lead. Like it doesn't hurt. And from him, like maybe any danger of presenting at the ball. That's all I would say. Azuro Bianco. Why can't it be Stevo? You told me. Yeah. I did mention in my post that bonus points if it's not Stevo, and obviously Azuro Bianco thinks it should be Stevo, and I would agree. He has been really consistent and deserves to be shouted out, even if it is, a bit repetitive. That's what I guess. If we're repetitively shouting him out, he's consistently good, and that is not something that we would have said of him earlier in the season, I guess it's not something we would have said about him last year. Shane Brown, that's the worst we could have possibly played, and we only lost by 7 goals. I agree. Didn't fire a shot all day. The boys missed some really easy goals, fumbled a lot. Stevo's form continued. Chom continues to be a present without rewards. Curtis was back to 2022 form. Yeah, I think we're seeing some consistent messages here with Comben, Curtis, and Stevo, and I would agree. I think it was the worst game we played for the year. It was worse than Brisbane for mine. Gold Coast the worst opposition, and boy, I know the defence was really bad against Brisbane, but our offence was horrific this week, and the turnovers were next level. It was really bad. So I would agree, Shane. What did someone say underneath Shane? Excellent summary, says Patrick. Couldn't agree more. Tom Stinson, with equal inside 50s, what's not working up front? So I think I talked a little bit about that earlier in the podcast, but for me, and it's just my opinion, I'm sure there's experts in the club that will have different things to say, but for me, our ball movement's not helping our forward line at all. because we're turning it over at horrific times. It's not predictable. The way that we're bringing up the field is not, I guess, it doesn't look like it's methodical to me. And there's just so many bombs inside 50. Like, it's really hard to know from the couch how much of that is game plan versus how much of that is I'm under pressure, I'm young, I'm just going to kick it long. But it's everyone doing it. Yeah, I think the reason why our conversion rate inside 50 is so bad is because our inside 50 kicks are horrific and not giving our forwards a chance. And I think that's why Steve-O and Paul Curtis have been able to have some success, because that's what their job is, to kind of feed off scraps and make something out of nothing. Whereas Combin and Larky are always going to look better when the ball's coming in correctly. And I guess, when when they're being hit up on a lead, or they're being working well in their own spaces, and that's just rarely happening at the moment. So hopefully that's my take on it, Tom. I'm not sure what's going on with our inside 50s at the moment, but it's giving David Noble, and I'm not here for it. Elder says Curtis Taylor and Paul Curtis were exciting. Also, I think, should Hall be better moved to the wing? He seemed to interfere with Zeeves and Shees, who have been good. Zerha's been a win since playing more midfield time. I'm excited for the youth, but need some more from the seniors. Fair bit to unpack there. I think I've talked about Paul Curtis. Curtis Taylor, I thought, was good, kicked another goal. He's just good for a goal a game at the moment. He was good without being great. Yeah, it's a weird one with Hall. I thought he was okay. I would have loved to see more from him, I guess. But if he's an older player, and I don't really know if he's going to come in and play a so-so game. Like, I don't know, just what are we doing there, I guess. I did think he interfered a little bit with... He just didn't look himself, I guess. I thought Zerha... I'd love to see him push up his possession count. I thought he did some good things. And I love his aggression, his attack on the ball. It's probably going to get him suspended a couple of times in his career, but he's aggressive. But he does need to, I guess, up his consistency, because when I looked at his stats after the game, I thought, I thought he got more of it than that. So he needs to work on the volume. And I'm excited about the youth, but need more from the seniors. I don't know. I think we're still playing a couple too many passengers that are senior players, and we might talk a bit about that towards the end. Anthony Ryan, time to push Mackay forward to influence his decision to leave and improve our backline. Interesting. I don't know how I feel about Ben Mackay at the moment, and I just want to give him another couple of weeks before I start being really hard on him or not. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one for me. I still believe that he can be our best defender. I know that we're going to have to pay for him in free agency to keep him. But I do think that if he can adjust to this structure that Clarko's trying to get him to play, I think he can be a really good player again. I think let's have a hold on Ben Mackay. NMFC 18, our backline is consistent. Yeah, I guess, I don't know if that's a positive. The players are consistent at the moment. They're consistently bad. So you're not wrong. That's at least a good observation. Matt O'Dwyer thinks Liam Shields has been a massive positive, gives his all, setting a great example. There's genuinely 5 I'd drop in front of him. Yeah, interesting. I would agree, he's been solid. He certainly hasn't been bad. I'd love to know the kind of influence that he's having week to week and out of the field. That's, I guess, and when I say out the field, I mean in terms of what he's saying to players, the kind of encouragement or directions he's giving. That's really hard for us to make a comment on, but I have to imagine that he has been strong on that. He came on and had 5 tackles, which was a team high, which is kind of an indictment on the rest of the team. But he has been good. I think he has to be good as one of those senior players, because I think we can only afford to have sort of 2 or 3 of those 30-plus players playing. So, yep, I agree. He has been solid. I'd love to hear those 5 that you drop in front of him. I could probably name 5, to be honest, too. And I might later on. And last one here, Daryl Parrott says, a step closer to Harley Reid. Now, come on, Daryl. I don't want us to be thinking about tanking at round 6. Would I love to have Harley Reid running around for us in the future? Absolutely. But let's hold fire. Let's see if we can turn the ship around. It was only last podcast I was talking about aiming for 7 or 8 wins, and that is not looking good right now. But let's look at the upside. There was some positives to take out of that game. Final thing to get to, obviously, just a quick look ahead to next week against Melbourne. We're playing at the MCG on Saturday night, so it'll be nice to be back in Melbourne, have a couple of games in a row in Melbourne. We've got, I think, St Kilda the week after that. So we have been travelling a little bit recently. We've been to Tassie, been up to the Gold Coast, been over to Perth. So I think it'll be good for us to stay at home and hopefully play better. I'm certainly very nervous about coming up against Melbourne's defence. I think May and Lever could potentially absolutely feast on Larkey and common errors, because if there's nothing that Lever and May do better than come off their player to support the rest of Melbourne's defence. And Larkey and Common recently have been leading into the same spots more than I would like. So that's going to make May and Lever's job really easy, unfortunately. So I am nervous about that, but let's wait and see how we go. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out on the MCG. Haven't played there yet this year, and we don't play there often, so it should be good. And we're coming off a 6-day break, but they being Melbourne, are coming off a 5-day break. So hopefully that kind of helps to cancel out the fact that we're travelling home and have been a bit off of late. That gives us a bit of a sniff, I think. It's not often that you get to play a side that's coming off a 5-day break, but I guess that's what happens with this Anzac Eve. They're actually playing as we speak, so that's going to be interesting. In terms of changes that I would like to see, and I guess this feeds into what I was talking about before, Howe, Turner and Core need a spell or to go permanently for mine. So Howe, he's so-so. He's an older player. He's not old, he's not in his 30s or anything, but he's not the future. He's not. I feel like we can see exactly what Daniel Howe is as a player. I don't see him now. Plans for the future. I'm done. Kane Turner, I've really tried to be a supporter of. Yeah, I mean, I'm running out of ways to support him. I'm not sure how you replace him, but I'll talk about that in a minute. And Core is a real whipping boy for the fans at the moment, and I get it. And after that performance, he does need a spell. He's been really struggling against the taller forwards. I know he's not a massive player himself. He's 192-ish, I think. But he just didn't look like he was putting in effort. And that's kind of, for me, if you're not putting in effort, then see you later. So give him a spell, make him work for it. I've seen enough. In terms of who I'd love to see come in, I think Wardlaw probably deserves a go in place of Howe. I mean, he was solid, and honestly, we need to get a bit more of that youth in, because we're going to lose matches. So let's lose matches playing some younger players. I'm happy at this point to give Marnie a go for Turner. It can't be worse. Because if Marnie kicks 1 goal every 6 matches and lays a couple of tackles, he's giving us what Turner's been giving us. So let's get Marnie in. Bergman was quiet, but again, let's give him a go for Core, because again, he can't be worse. And I think at this point, like I said before, I'd rather play the younger players and lose rather than play Core, Turner and Howe and be losing anyway. Greenwood was really good in the reserves, but I don't know, we could bring him in because we want an extra bigger bodied midfielder playing against Oliver and Petraka and those bigger bodied Melbourne midfielders, but for what? I just don't know what the purpose of that is long term. Maybe we lose the game by a goal or two less, but I think we've got to keep thinking about developing those young players. And just my final thought, I feel like North Melbourne fans were really angry on the weekend, and I think that's absolutely fair. We were putrid. I do think that maybe we got a little bit ahead of ourselves after those first couple of wins. We need to remember that, sure, we're in what feels like the 4th or the 5th year of the serious down part of our rebuild, but it hasn't been smooth sailing through that. It's not like you could say, and we're about to come out of that and it's going to be all up from here. It's been a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step backward in this interrupted Reece Shaw and then David Noble time. So, sure, Clarko, I think we all feel is a great coach and we'll get there, but it's going to take time. Unfortunately, there's just no way. You can't magic experience into players. We've got to play the games, unfortunately. So hopefully we can put on a good show and a good fight against Melbourne this week. I'm certainly not expecting a win, but and to be honest, I'd take a 7-goal loss. If it's a 7-goal loss where we look like we're giving it a go, you can see some good things. Some players play well. We're sort of in the game until late. Like, I would take that, to be honest, but we shall see. So thank you all again for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, and give me a follow on social media, including Twitter @NorthPodShow. I'll speak to you hopefully after a massive win against Melbourne. Go North!